Hey Sri, how's it going?
Good, Aditya. How are you?
Doing good, doing good. First off, I wanted to say thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to hop on this podcast. And for our viewers here, I want to go ahead and give a little bit of a background knowledge and idea about why I wanted to do this podcast, and especially with you. So, the reason I started this podcast was so that I could create good content for people who are similar to me in a similar place in life as me, people who have interests like in entrepreneurship, technology. They want to be leaders in the future. They want to do something cool, interesting outside of their job. Maybe if they're in college, they want to do something outside of their like coursework. And this could be business, hobbies, travel, anything. And essentially, I want to be able to bring on people who can bring inspiration to me and also like other viewers in this channel and give them the epiphany or that aha moment of how can I get out of the place that I'm in right now and get to the place that I want to be. So without much further ado, Sri, would you be able to go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience and give us a little bit of background about yourself?
Absolutely. Aditya, I have to say, first of all, I'm super thrilled to be here on this podcast and appreciate you reaching out and talking about the initiative that you have with AK Experience, which is a fabulous name. And and I said, well, just it sounds amazing to kind of sit and chat with you for 30 minutes and engage on a topic that's meaningful for you, meaningful for me, that I've had some experiences over many years, and it'll be a good way to kind of get this out there on in the waves for people to hear and react to. So I'm hoping, with that experience, I can bring some color with my journey and help enrich this conversation. So one thing I always say, my favorite quote by William McRaven, who wrote this book called the Wisdom of the Bullfrog. One of the things he always said is, if you want to change the world, start off by making your bed every day, right? Everything starts small. The simple things in life. Get your fundamentals right if you want to do some big things. And I always believe my experiences. If I go string all the events in my life and attach it all, everything started with something small, and one thing led to the other, one thing led to the other. It just got bigger and bigger and bigger, and hoping most people have that similar experience. So I've always found this fascinating too, in the topic of leadership and pulling these experiences together, and helping others kind of react to it, learn from it. There's so much knowledge out there, like so many books, so many things you can read, but it's very hard to like find these simple nuggets of tools that you can like distill it down to like everyday practices, everyday things. And I'm hoping we can engage on that kind of topics that's more relevant for people to like consume and absorb and do some simple things that will lead to like big things as they practice it and do more of. And I'm super excited to be here and having that conversation with you. So I'll just quickly start out by saying my name is Sri Ayyeppen, and I'm the Chief Revenue Officer, President of a company called Argano, based in Plano, Texas. And I'll talk a little bit about kind of where I started. I started out as an engineer with an undergrad in electrical engineering, and then went on to do my master's in electrical engineering. I was a math geek. I just enjoy math. Everyday math, and from simple to complex, and always was a problem solver. Like everything, I want to look at everything in a framework of a problem and think about what are the different solutions that's available and what's the most optimal solution, and how do you find the most optimal solution. And along the way, I've had built some experiences in industrial manufacturing, industrial design, telecom. And 25 years ago, I was in this telecom company, kind of trying to solve something that's very critical and important for our business. And you solve it, and it's successful, and people agree it's successful. And then you naturally have this mindset of just assuming that everybody knows the answer. Like, well, if you can solve it, anybody can solve it, right? And then you go around the world and probe in. I was in different advisory boards and started looking around, only to find out that there weren't very many people who had the same set of experiences or same set of problem solving skills. And if you put the right teams together around it, we brought in a great set of people to go say, here's a problem and here is an answer, that if we can master it, if we can excel at it, there is a business opportunity. So that's how I landed my business about 22 years ago, and we can talk more about it. But that was kind of the root of, with the problem solving mindset, and a problem that I saw needed a really solid answer. And then the market that's saying, look, we really want that problem solved, and we'll spend a lot of money on it. That's your perfect ingredient to start a business. And that's where we started the business. And about 4 years ago, had an exit to a large private equity, and I'm here working for a company that we're on to doing some bigger and better stuff.
That makes sense. So speaking more about like your journey within entrepreneurship, right? Are you able to recall like a few pivotal moments that really influenced your entrepreneurial path? Like, what was a motivation for you? What really like kind of drove you to take this path and stick with it? Because a lot of people, for them, like they don't really know that entrepreneurship is an option because there's so many paths, and then a lot of people kind of have this fear-based mindset regarding starting your own thing, getting out of this corporate bubble that's there. So what was kind of your motivation? What was your story with that?
Yeah. Well, I have to always start with my dad because he was an entrepreneur. He did exactly what you just said. Uh, 40, 50 years ago, when he was working for a company, he quit his job. He said, I'm going to go start something. He started his own consultancy, and the rest was history, right? So I grew up just watching my dad just doing his stuff, right? He'll work hard on a Sunday, he'll take off Monday, he'll work hard on a Tuesday, take off Wednesday. He'll travel, he'll visit clients, he'll travel everywhere. I just saw him like grew up in this thing where he was just creating some big impact in the marketplace. And nobody asked him to, right? No, there was no boss of my dad. Like he just woke up every day and just created the impact that he created. And I can go create a life history of everything he has done in his business career. I was like, wow. And that just kind of opened a sense of new wisdom for me. Just like, well, there is a path out there. And I just out of a young, very early age, I was just attracted to this whole idea of, look, if you have an idea, and if you know how to get up in the morning and go solve for it every day, and just there will be teams that you can work with and do something special. That's where it started. Along the way, I was convinced, just through my experiences, if you have a great answer to just a plaguing problem, and if you know how to formulate the answer, build the right product or the service, there are people to engage with you, work with you, and make it successful, and let you create that impact that you want to go create. So I was always an entrepreneur in my heart. Even my early days of starting my working career, worked for a few years, but I just said I just need to get out and go do something. And it's hard. I mean, the first few months or weeks to get it out, it's nerve-wracking. It's not settling. But it's all about practice. And if you just practice it, just take it one day at a time and just continue to work through it, solve one thing, get to the next one, solve the other. I mean, it was doable. So when we started it, I started 20 years ago. I mean, it took a while, 5, 6, 9 months before the machine started to work and kick in. And someday you're anxious, someday you're wondering, will this work? Someday will everything be successful? But once you get the first success, that leads to the second, that leads to the third, and you just kind of keep building on it, get the culture aligned, get the team behind it, and it's hard. The day one is hard, day zero is hard, but as you keep doing it, man, it just becomes easier.
Makes sense. Speaking of the kind of the snowball effect of emotions that you mentioned, right? Are you able to maybe give a lot of the audience a picture of the initial days when you're founding your company? So like the ideation process, things like that, because I feel like a lot of viewers here also are interested in this subject of entrepreneurship, and maybe some of the topics like, oh, should people take funding or should people use their own money? Certain
Yeah.
topics like that. Are you able to touch on those too?
Absolutely. This was, 2002, 2003, early days of, here is an idea, let's go create something. And it's a long story, kind of how that got started, but I give a lot of credits to my business partner, Howard. Howard and we've met on the job, and we had a great working style together. And like he and I said, hey, here's an idea, let's go create it. Let's go, like everybody, right? We had an idea, we had a way to solve it, and we could go find customers. But always like, hey, you want to go find investors, right? We did their, presentations to all the venture capitalists and all the different investors. And we did a whole circuit in California and Texas and New York. And just like, who has this understanding of the marketplace we're going after? It's kind of early stages. And, while that was going on, I mean, we had some great people interested in the opportunity. And, we went to this beautiful, kind of call it entrepreneurship conference. I forget what it was in California. And I think it was kind of meant for all these startups, kind of early stages. We just went there, kind of walked the halls, and we sat in this presentation. And one of these presenters, he was talking about a business he built in like 5 years, and pretty successfully built it. And he kind of explained like how you can just build something like bootstrap it, right? It's just like hard work, day to day. It's a grind, but you can get things done. Somehow we just walked away super inspired by it. I was like, wow, we can go around, investors coming in and wanting a lot of your company that hasn't even started yet, or you can actually go build something
Yeah.
and then show how this works. And nothing against investors, but I think sometimes getting that early kick of doing something, building something, bootstrapping it was our way. We said, hey, let's go build this, and we started doing that. I think a year, two later, it was we never had to look back, because it again, like I said, one thing led to another. And the other thing, we always kind of built this management style of, you got to have the hands on the steering wheel. Leadership must exist, and leadership must guide. In early days, like, you don't want to things. If you know the statistics of businesses, right? Less than 2% of the businesses ever find the fifth year of the companies that have started.
Yeah.
And if you want to be one of them, you better have the leadership on watch every day, the culture, like how you're guiding it, the team you're assembling around it, how you're coaching the team, and really kind of clarity and intent and the statement of direction, right? Your team needs to be clear every day when you walk in, march in, guide the teams to go do something magical that's never been done before, or it's done differently, right? They need a clear vision, clear path, clear direction, clear intent, and more and more you kind of level set that and have a clear path in terms of what the North Star is. I think more and more you start clarifying to people every day, what's the North Star? Because if you don't know your North Star, your journey never gets predictable, right? So if you want to avoid I call it the VUCA moments, right? The volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, which is like a traditional term for, you got to have a clear North Star. You guide people the same direction, and leadership must exist, and hands on the steering wheel. And you can, that's what we followed. We had these principles, and we just kept building it, and we were just, building something very special for everybody.
That makes sense. And speaking of leadership, right? A lot of people, they struggle when it comes to managing people, working with people, dealing with a lot of the chaos that comes when you're dealing with so many different groups, and trying to coordinate all of this. So based on your experience, during running the entrepreneurship, running the startup that you had, and also maybe currently the work that you're doing, what are some top management related insights that you would offer to upcoming entrepreneurs?
Well, one thing, first of all, everything comes down to number one thing is the culture, right? What is the culture of the core, right? Not one individual, it's the culture of the core, what you're building. And how do you really take it to the rest of the organization, right? Everybody should kind of see the same way, understand the same way, behave the same way. My statement I always use is, culture is something that happens when you're not around, right? It's not about, culture is not something I can keep there and telling people what to do. Culture is something, if I'm off, traveling, playing golf, whatever happens, is the culture I'm leaving behind. So I'm a in it. And for us, making sure everybody sees the same way, execute the same way, things happen, whether it's with our clients, with our people in the company, with the other business units that we work with. Everything has to go with that culture. It happens regardless of whether you're not there or not. So that's number one. Second, too, it comes down to the people, right? It's the leadership team that has the eyes on the target, eyes on the ball, and operating that every day, right? With, I would never say without making mistakes, but has the culture of learning from mistakes, right? We all have to make mistakes because you can't create new stuff without making mistakes. There's nothing like a mistake-free environment. You make mistakes, but you quickly learn from it and say, how do you document it? So if you see this again, like here is the response to it, right? So have a clear response plan. And then, the third thing that's super important for us is the focus on the why, the fundamentals. It's you can say purpose, vision, and all that. But if you go back to this famous author, start with the why, Simon Sinek, right? So he has this principle of golden circles. So he talks about the why in the middle being very few people in the company actually know the why. Then you kind of know how you do it, which is like your way of doing it, and then what you can do. The beauty of that is the what can change. You can do multiple things. As the landscape changes, environment changes, you pivot, you have a new idea, you can, but ultimately the why never changes. Like the purpose and the intent of like why you're coming to work every day, why are you doing what you're doing, why are you innovating the way you're innovating? That why, having that clear with the entire company and making sure more people in the company understand that in a way that's simple to understand, they can explain it, adds so much value to your everyday. So having the right culture, the right leadership team to kind of guide people every day, and having the core why, then what it does is you're not micromanaging, you're building something you're creating followers and fans of an idea that everybody wants to contribute and come together, which is a good kind of call it 1, 2, 3 of
That
building
makes,
something foundationally sound.
makes sense. Um, I like that you mentioned Simon Sinek because same here.
Yeah,
I'm a big fan of him. And
yeah.
so for the viewers, actually, I met Sri through a workshop that he did last weekend for basically young people like high schoolers, college, early career people who want to get better at leadership skills, problem solving skills, just build those core like entrepreneurial skills. And this was a free workshop that he offered. And I was like, you know what? Let's sign up for it, see what it's about. And that's how I got to meet him. And I'm glad I did because now he's on my podcast and giving all you guys this value.
That's
And
all. Enjoyed having you there, and the interactions were super valuable. I always say, when I do these, the value is bi-directional, right? So I also get value from the questions that being asked.
mhm.
It think as well. So it's a value for both sides.
For sure, for sure. And the reason that I also mentioned that is because I loved a lot of the problem solving strategies that you kind of gave for the people who were at the workshop. And I've never kind of heard them, you know, you see a lot of like YouTube videos with advice for entrepreneurs and stuff like that, but a lot of times it's very like woo woo, kind of like, oh, wake up in the morning, you know, some kind of
Put your
like David Goggins type of thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like bootstrap, you got it, go. And then I'm like, how am I supposed to solve a problem when I, encounter it? How am I supposed to stop procrastination? Because there's this big lump of a problem that I have to get around. But there were a few strategic ways that you kind of displayed within the workshop. So could you share with the audience some of those methods?
Sure, sure, sure. I mean, I would say, look, if you want to solve some complex problems, going back to what William McRaven said, you can do some big stuff if you know how to do the little things well and string them together, right? It just causes some big, big movement. Um, I'm a big believer in clarity, right? So if you have the clarity of like what you want to do, and put that in a simple framework. So one of the things that hope you enjoyed learning was this idea of factfulness, right? Being very factful. Don't make assumptions. Don't think. Don't assume stuff, and don't again. You got to get rid of all the blind spots in the activities that you're going to do. So the concept of Johari window, like the known versus unknowns, like really kind of driving simple things, even if it's a simple assumption, kind of put in there and say, just think about it,
Mhm.
talk to people, like find an expert, understand it. More and more you start moving assumptions and blind spots and threats and everything. Just gives you this squeezy feeling of VUCA, right, into this world of facts. So now you can deal with facts, right? You're completely facts driven. So
Yeah.
facts don't lie. Data doesn't lie. It is in front of you. It just kind of helps you make some better decisions.
Just
And
real quick
secondly,
before, sorry, just real quick before you move to the second point, are you able to kind of summarize what VUCA is and what the Johari window is really? Because these are really cool. So I really want the audience to kind of pick up on that.
sure, I mean, I've learned this in one of the leadership trainings I did at West Point Military Academy years ago with my buddies. VUCA stands for this term that military uses all the time, and it's a business lingo because I've seen that in a couple of management school that have done some workshops at Stanford and Booth School of Business. Uh, VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, where you just hard for you to these are things like the market is volatile, people are volatile, situations are volatile, and especially if you're in, like, you think of a mission on the field, a simple sales call, right? You pick up a flight and go visit a client with your team and trying to position something, pitch something, bring value, bring the outcomes. It's a volatile situation, right? I mean, it's just like you have no, and more you understand the idea of what volatility means, you're able to kind of understand with facts and better control it. There is uncertainty, there is market uncertainty, what's going to happen. There's complexity, right? I mean, nothing is simple. You assume it's simple, but these unknowns and blind spots make it more complicated than what you would imagine. And then finally, the sense of ambiguity, right? It just like, you don't know. I mean, you can make decisions both ways, and it just sometimes it's hard to like really understand which way you want to go. And it's like the situation is ambiguous. So if you put all that together, it's a very interrelated thing. It's like nothing discrete, right? So there is it's all nothing is mutually exclusive. It's all interconnected. But it's a sense of all those four that comes together. But more and more you do this exercise of like fact finding, make sure you have data in front of you, you kind of string these decisions together. It just kind of helps these VUCA moments to become a lot more clear. And you can have a path, gets the process more predictable, and you achieve that outcome in a much more predictable and a meaningful way. And then the second thing I always say, it's like, look, you got to be able to communicate intent very clearly. There's another thing I learned as well. It's like it's the concept of leaders' intent. Your intent is made up of three things: like what's your intent and why are you asking somebody to go do and take on a mission, and then what's the end state, what you would like to be the end state, and preferably a couple milestones in the middle.
Mhm.
So let people get creative. You have no idea the amount of creativity that people have, like in your team, from the rank and file, and you enable them to come up with ideas to go solve for it, and they come up with creative ways to go solve for it. And we learned a lot of that ideas and concept. And then finally, how do you commit to something, right? How do you make sure, like, here's a path, we're clear, focus on the process, not the outcome, like get the process. And we'll talk a little bit about practice and deliberate practice in a second. But the idea of how do you know what are facts, how do you know, how do you kill VUCA and create a new way of thinking about it, how do you know this process, and how do you make sure that you're enabling people with clear strategy in achieving that. And more you practice it, you work as a team, you practice it, it just becomes a pretty well-oiled machine. And those are some of the things we talked about, and glad you found a lot of value in it.
For sure, definitely. Um, Speaking of the value that you offered in the workshop, um, let's talk about young people. We're trying
Mhm.
to, go places, do things, do something big, right? A lot of times people have this kind of a drive. They want to do something in life. However, they're kind of stuck on where can I start? How do I even like develop those like mental models and mindsets for me to get out of this rut and actually take action on the things that I want to? So, what would be some advice that you'd give for people in college or early career who are trying to get started on this path?
Yes. So one thing about, at least in certain pockets of helping groups kind of get it out of that rut in solving something, I saw this general notion of seeking perfections in step one, right?
Mhm.
Which always like, man, my first thing has to be perfect. And they're constantly like stuck in that world of like, well, I've done all this process and it has to be perfect. Well, the problem is nothing can be perfect in step one, right? It gets to perfection. But the idea of continuous improvement is actually a good thing, right? Get something out there, let it simmer, let people react to it, work through it, get it out there, and go create another layer of perfection. What it does is two things. One is gives you the kind of practice what you have to run through, and more you start thinking about how do we get to that state of perfection? It might take 5 steps the first time you do it. It'll take 4 the second time you do it. 3 the third. It has a reduction pattern, and then you start to understand how this works, which goes back to deliberate practice and how you think about, just knowing what you do and just do it in a repetitive model, iterative improvement, continuous improvement. There's a lot of words you can pull in. And secondly, it's the idea of critical thinking, where, can you build that idea of thinking on your feet? Which something when I interview people, when I'm talking to people, and it's like, interacting with them, it's like, how do I find people? The best people I work with have been like amazing critical thinkers, where you are hit with a problem, you're hit with a situation, you're just like able to quickly absorb, filter things down, find the facts, keep your emotions low, and really kind of help drive to a decision and help people around you to kind of get to that end state, which is a very special thing. So at an early age, as you start working and build those kind of critical thinking ideas, like simple steps to problem solving, and just practice it over and over again. One of the best books on that in that model, 2 books. My favorite author is this management guru called Ram Charan. He wrote this book called Execution, which is phenomenal, right? Execution talks about getting things done in an iterative way, and you just get better at it. But one book that especially for people starting early, that helps is a book called What Your CEO Wants You to Know. It's a very simple, guideline book to like, here is a shopkeeper, like thinking about products that he needs to sell. He has to buy products, he has to sell them, he has to make profit, he has to take care of his team, so when he goes through all that, there is a very simple way of distilling a business down. So whether if you're an entrepreneur trying to create a business, you got to get the simple fundamentals right. You got to be able to critically think and adjust to changing criteria, and be able to kind of do that using a continuous improvement model. You never get perfect the first iteration, but getting there in multiple steps is a good thing. And more you do it, you're just going to get good at it.
That makes sense for sure. So a lot of people, especially when they're starting off, they have to deal with people. And this is currently something that I've been really trying to work on as well, which is how do I get better at communicating with people? How do I get better at working in teams and overall develop that kind of leadership skill? And what are some advice that you would give to upcoming entrepreneurs regarding these things?
One thing when you talk about working in teams, and you always have to think about this: what makes teams work? What's about them that makes it successful? Why certain teams work? Why certain teams don't? And in my experience, the number one thing is the trust between the teams, right? You got to have the sense of trust. And there is way to build the trust, right? Trust doesn't happen overnight, right? Trust happens when you start showing peer accountability, that you're not going to let somebody fall, right? I mean, we all do these exercises where, you're trying to build these peer accountability and peer trust. But it comes down to like the shared experiences that you're going to create, and shared experiences causes shared knowledge. And now you're on that same plane of thought, right? When you have a problem to deal with, when you have to find an answer, when you're in a situation where you're interacting with the team, those shared experiences having the same sense of background and experience will allow you to kind of see the problem the same way and see the end result the same way. And more you do that, and you hold each other accountable, right? So build a sense of peer accountability. This one of this favorite workshops that I learned many years ago, and we actually institute within our teams as well, as this whole sense of commitment-based management. So like as a team, you come together, and there are some contingency, call it promise-based management, promise, commitment, or kind of fall in that same quadrant of what this actually means. It's like focusing on the result. Now, if you want to focus on the result, ultimately everybody should have that same sense of understanding what that concept is, right? So it strengthens communication. It strengthens communication where there is not assumptions built into it. It's truthful, it's factual, it's clear, and there is a sense of finesse amongst the team to like understand those facts together, using both the trust that they built and also the shared experiences. And once you start building a working style with that commitment-based management, then what holds you together is that commitment. It's a commitment of getting stuff done. At the end of the day, that accountability model that you're going to build is like, I'm going to get this done, right? And if you're supposed to help me in that process, I'm going to hold you accountable to jump in where needed and help me accomplish. So this is something that we work with teams over and over again. Like, this is not something that happens overnight. Um, I've seen teams that you build it from the grounds up, and it's very organically teams coming together and achieving some things with just the sense of peer accountability and trust that how we can work with each other. And there are also teams that have come together from different walks of life, from different experiences, from various countries, come together, very diverse understanding of things, and you're all on the same mission.
For sure.
It comes down to ultimately deliberate practice. The stuff we talked about, Malcolm Gladwell in one of his books called The Outliers, he talks about like how the Beatles became really good at what they do because they used to play in like clubs in Hamburg, Germany, like every club, every bar. They didn't care how many people were sitting in the audience. They'll go play their different songs, different styles, different music. They kept doing that. And after doing that over 1,000 times, they just became very natural as a team. They'd understand. And I would say this, man, again, outside of work, I'm a musician and a golfer. And, both I can relate to that same thing. I win golf tournaments as teams, and I have great concert experience as a team. But ultimately, it's the understanding of where you are, where you stand, how, and everybody sees the same way. There is this trust in the teams, as well as when you come together, there is a sense of peer accountability that you're expected to show up and hold each other accountable. At the same time, you're supposed to produce. And more the teams come together and start working, you get really, really, really good at that. And the deliberate practice is like a phenom that is always the right way to think about it.
For sure. So to everybody listening, make sure when you make promises, deliver on those. Don't let your teammates be like, come on, man, he said you're going to do this. And like, he didn't do it. Don't be that person. Make sure you deliver on it. And then build that sense of trust, essentially. And then I think you're saying like with practice, you keep doing it, you slowly develop it.
Exactly.
Now for a question that I ask a lot of the guests on my show. Mr. Sri Ayyeppen, what is your vision for the future? And this could be for yourself, for the world, the people around you, and how do you see yourself contributing to that vision?
Well, when I think about, again, I would say vision when I think about two things. One is my business / professional, the community, and of course there's a family stuff. But when I think about those two things together, I'll tell you what I'm excited about and what I'm very engaged in learning more. And that's going to cost me to think about how I can use that to kind of, sharpen some of this. First of all, the growth of AI, Gen AI, that's impacting every field. I mean, that's very interesting to me. We're looking at it from our business, like how do we do our business differently going forward, and how is that going to impact? And we're trying to solve that. I'm using that for conceptually, like whether it's music production. My son and I, we do kind of a lot of joint music together. I'm thinking about how can AI impact that experience, right? I'm thinking about how this could all bring us together differently with more impact. And then I spend time on kind of the coaching the next generation of leaders who can come in and learn through that lens, learn through that experience, whether with or without AI. How are they going to like fast track the learning that people had in their lives, and how you can absorb that and put that into, again, practice and make things better. So when I think about our vision, I mean, ultimately we all have visions of like, what do you want to do long term, and build more companies and raise more capital and all that stuff. But I'm going to keep that aside for now. Is like, I would really like to see the sense of community around us in helping each other, kind of making the impact that we can go create in the community. But at the same time, create the sense of sustainable giving back, right? The thing that comes to me is this concept of Mind Valley, right? Vishen Lakiani, he's an amazing, speaker, author, and he has this thing about these three most important questions in life, right? So he talks about what do I want to experience in life? And you go list it down. And how do I want to grow? And you go list it down. Then what do I want to contribute? So it's this perfect balance of you want to grow to find an experience that you want to go experience. And those two doesn't stand by itself without the contribution and the sacrifices you're willing to make. So it's the contribution meets the experience that you have with the growth that you're going to create. And everything is like a rubber band. You got to kind of stretch, right? If you don't stretch and work harder, and you're not going to see some experiences. So I think getting that idea into a broader mindset, like around me, whether it's business or my community, and let people all understand that fundamentally, and create the trust in teams, create the trust in people, create the peer accountability, and like do things smarter, better together. I think that's one of the tracks, I would say, the themes of the vision that I have that I could, impact and help. And just providing the opportunity to create more sustainability in everything that we do, right? It's not everything is not a tear up and tear down, and you kind of have to go recreate again. It's just like, how do you create this one step? And I look at my experiences, like one thing led to another. You always build on small experiences leading to large, and it just kind of builds up. And I can look back and say we created something very sustainable, that lasts long, that's stands the test of time. There's a lot of concepts around it. So my vision is, if we can go do something as a community and it just kind of stands the test of time, it's like built to last, and with the right kind of themes and the people coming together with the right framework, I think it's something I would like to see in my lifetime, and in the time I give back, and then see how things like AI and how the world is changing, impacting that as well. Right? It's just like there's a lot more business ideas that we can go talk about, but I'll stay within that scope of that conversation for this call.
For sure. That's very profound. So, and I really connect with what you mentioned about building stuff that's like long lasting, because a lot of times if we look at ancient maybe architecture, right? We see castles, we see like temples, we see a lot of like Greek and Roman structures that were built 2000 years ago that were built to like last, built to stay. So those are often really cool. And the reason so many people marvel at those, I feel like, is because of the fact that they've been here for so long. And we have these buildings that we build around us that, might fall down in like the next 20 years. But those things lasted for 2000 years. So really cool stuff. And now to close out, before we close out, I want to ask you, what is one thing that you would like to share with the world? This could be any kind of advice, quote, mindset, story, just a quick one that you'd like to share with the world since you're on the podcast.
Yeah, I would say, as we talked about, a lot of, let me frame it up and then I'll give you my answers. So, we talked about frameworks and tools and things that you apply, create a different mindset of like executing things and getting stuff done. Just my experience is my experience. Nobody can replicate it, right? But what people can take it is like, here are the things that you can actually go create a better experience for you, because we all have different backgrounds and how we come together. Connecting the dots on learning stuff, focusing on process, not attached to the outcomes. And there is I can go on the spiritual side on how that's an important fact as well. Is this idea of deliberate practice. I think I'm going to leave that with one thought. There's a great book. As a golfer, I attached to this idea. There is a book called Every Shot Must Count, right? So there's another PGA golfer who wrote this book, Every Shot Must Have a Purpose, which means, you don't go to a driving range and just kind of just randomly hit balls. Just like that doesn't really do anything for you. So one of the things I go on the range and actually play a golf course in my head. It's a deliberate practice. I'm practicing with intent, practicing with a plan. So I actually play hole number 1, play hole number 2, play hole number 3, and play hole number. So in my head, I've already kind of picked up the club, I picked up the shot. I know what to do. So when I go and play the course, it just becomes a natural thing because I've already in my head framed up a vision. There's a lot of comparisons and things that you can put in the world of music, the world of your work and business and all that. But I'm going to leave this with one thought, like every shot must count, make it deliberate, make it a deliberate practice, and practice with intent. Because more and more we do that, you're just going to get good at these small things happening over and over and over again. You just get really good at it. and become very natural at it. So I want to leave that with one thought, which is so close to me, and you can apply it to pretty much every minute in your life.
Deliberate practice.
Deliberate practice.
Sri, it's been a great time. It's been great having you on the podcast, and really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be here and share your wisdom and insights with everybody who's watching. And everyone who's watching, thank you so much for showing the support. Go down, hit the like button, share, subscribe, show some love to our guest here and also your boy. And with that being said, thank you so much.
Very cool. Aditya, thank you. It was a pleasure being here chatting with you. And let's do it again sometime in the near future.
Sounds good.
Right. Awesome.